standpoint of trajectory. The good news is that even though we were that far off, and even though we had some issues in the early stage of the boost, which meant that we weren't flying as efficiently, we did get there. And there, small margin, but we got there. 328,491 feet. Keep in mind, guys, we were going to go 360, okay? But these anomalies meant that we just barely got over. That's about 400. That's about 400 feet over the 100 kilometers. As far as the details of the data, this is. Oh, you want me to hold it up for a picture? You know, this is just some data that we've been looking at back there. Oh, okay. But let me point out that we have only done an extremely cursory look at data. I was handed this just 4 minutes before I had to come over here. Okay. We did look at some video. We did look at some absolutely spectacular video, in which I believe you are getting here within, what is it, within the hour or so? Yeah. And yeah, you are making B-rolls available. I don't know what's exactly on that. Is that the summary that we looked at?
That's right. It'll be.
Okay. Okay, so at any rate, Mike, you can't keep that secret because it's on the video that's been released.
Daisy.
You got it.
Thank you guys, both of you. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for these two guys. And I feel very, very honored to have been chosen to do this.
491.
It was very exciting. I must say I wasn't scared. I was a little nervous when we got in the airplane, but I was not afraid all the way up. But I was a little afraid on the way down. Boy, when you re-enter at 2.9 Mach and you start hitting the atmosphere, the noises you hear are somebody talking to you very, very sharply. You know, and you begin to believe that, wow, should I really be doing this? But I did an interesting thing that nobody was aware I was going to do. And when I got to apogee, I stopped flying the airplane. I stopped the rates. I got all the rates and all down using the RCS system, which worked beautifully. I only used about a half of one bottle of RCS air, and we have two. And then I reached in my pocket, and I took out some candy-coated chocolates, all different colors, and I let them go in front of my face. And they just spun around like little sparkling things. And I was so blown away I couldn't even fly the airplane. I got another handful and threw them out as well.
And we were trying to talk to you and you weren't answering.
Yeah, right. So you will see that on the video because I was caught by the camera in the cabin.
Not in space.
Right. It melts in it doesn't melt in your hand, but and neither does it melt in space.
Okay. Tell you what. I know all of you want to ask a lot of questions, and you will be doing that. However, I want to do something in a little bit different order. And we have a couple of presentations and announcements, and I want to do them first. So once we get into Q&A, we can do nothing but Q&A when we get done. And Mike will also be describing more of the flight, and I'm sure he'll describe more of the flight as he takes your questions. But right now, first, I'd like to introduce the Associate Administrator of the Commercial Space Transportation Department. Oh, yeah, but I was going to get to that. But the FAA Commercial Space Transportation. Oh, no wonder. Patty Grace Smith.
Good afternoon. This flight of SpaceShipOne is a historic moment. I know that you shared the excitement that I felt this morning. Nothing like the adrenaline rush of watching that happen as history was being made and as we opened the frontier for commercial human spaceflight. This is the first time a manned reusable launch vehicle on an FAA licensed launch has reached 100 kilometers. Like US military and NASA astronauts, the FAA now has its own way to recognize those who reach space in the United States through private endeavors. DOT, FAA, commercial astronaut wings are awarded to pilots and flight crew on board an AST licensed launch vehicle on a flight that exceeds 50 miles. We at the DOT, FAA, are excited by the prospects for space tourism that are anticipated as a result of this successful launch. So let me just say that the flight today opens a new chapter in history, making space access within the reach of ordinary citizens like you and me. It is a major step ushering in a new, low-cost era in space travel. Thanks to Burt Rutan and Scale Composites and the capabilities they continue to demonstrate, space travel and space tourism, lower cost access to space, are a lot closer than they were just yesterday. So, on behalf of Secretary of Transportation Nolan Mineta, FAA Administrator Marion Blakey, I am very pleased and honored to present for the very first time these FAA commercial astronaut wings to Mike Melville in recognition of this tremendous achievement.
Who would have thought?
Wow. This plaque commemorates this historic occasion. It will be displayed as prominently.
You can bet on it. Yeah, there's not too many of those around.
Mike, move out a little bit further out. Thank you.
They're right there. Down there.
No,
And straight away, sir. That's the wing. Hold it up.
Mike, a little bit.
Hold the wings up there.
Okay. Thank you very much, guys.
Turn this way
Oh,
and
I'm
give
sorry.
us just a few seconds.
Missed it, huh?
You look to your right just for 1 second.
Okay.
And also to Burt Rutan and Scale Composites, the entire Scale Composites team, who made it all happen.
Over this way, Bert.
Can you guys move out?
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Perfect.
Get it? Now, don't ever say that Burt Rutan doesn't kiss up to the FAA.
Now you set precedent.
Yeah, 3 words.
We have a visitor from
I don't know.
the folk that call us the colonies, from England, to make a presentation is David Hoxett from the Guinness World Records.
Thank you, Bert. Thank you all. Guinness World Records doesn't really acknowledge many firsts, but every now and again there's a human endeavour such as this which we believe really transcends all superlatives. So it's my great honour and privilege in our 50th anniversary to present this certificate to Paul Allen, Burt Rutan and the cast and crew of Scale Composites for the first ever privately funded manned space flight. Congratulations all.
Yes, yes.
There we go.
Here.
Move out.
My father.
Almost all the way to the end of the stage. The front of the this one.
The other front.
Right in front of
And one here. Here. Bert. Here. Mike. flies right.
That's pretty cool.
Here, yes. Can you look here? Yeah. Mike. Thank
Take that home. Yeah, over
you.
the side.
You got a lot.
Hey, come on, this side of the stage. Come on, this side, yeah. Oh, cool.
There we go.
River goes. Yeah, right.
Wow, exciting day.
Great, thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for reading. Thank you very much. Congratulations again.
Okay, we're happy to take your questions.
Go ahead.
Yeah, could you, I think it was for Bert or for Mike, could you describe?
Now we've got a mic for you. If you could also state your name and organization,
Yeah,
please.
this is Charlie Pettit from the U.S. News and World Report. Thank you very much. Could you describe what exactly the anomaly was in the spacecraft?
It was a control problem with the trims. When you get above supersonic, you can no longer move the stick. It's like it's welded to the airplane. So I have to fly it using pitch roll and yaw trim, and I had a roll trim problem. We had a backup for that system. I went to the backup, and the backup saved the day. But that was planned. It was planned to have a backup that would save the day.
So just to follow up, this does not have to do with that crumpled trim tab or whatever it was on the back.
We don't think it does.
Oh, no, it had nothing to do with that.
Not connected to the bank. Thank you.
Nothing to do with that.
Go ahead, CBS News down here.
Yeah, Bill Horowitz, CBS News. Was that issue related to missing the box for entry about 22 miles? Or was that a separate?
It certainly was. Yeah, that's what drove me 20 miles away in about 5 seconds. It was amazing.
So move down here.
Steve Futterman, also with CBS News. Actually, I'd like to ask all three of you to answer this question. Maybe start with you, Bert, and then Mike, and then Paul. The emotions going through your heart and mind right now, what does this mean for you, Bert, Mike, and Paul?
Well, yesterday there was a plan that Paul and I would be wired with microphones for the media as we met Mike coming out of the spaceship, and let me just say that I was glad they didn't give me a mic. It meant a lot to me. Emotionally, there is one part of the Voyager flight that Mike or I can't talk about without, we can't talk normally about, and that was the time when the Voyager, after that 9-day flight, and we met them out over the ocean in the darkness, and we, during that 9 days, didn't think they'd come back at times. And there was a strobe light going on, and we said over the radio, a real normal thing, Dick, turn the strobe light off so we can be sure that what we see is you. And when the strobe light went out, Mike and I, together in the airplane, had tears running down our face and we couldn't talk. And to this day, does it still happen with you?
Same problem for me.
We can't talk about that. And I had a much stronger of the same impression out there today.
Yeah, I felt, I had to stay sharp, and I couldn't be sudden to blubber and cry and carry on while I was flying. But well, once I hit the ground, I tell you, I was. It was a very, very emotional thing. I was so glad to get it back down and make a decent landing that didn't break anything, because that problem that had occurred was also there while I landed. So I couldn't afford to touch a trim system on the landing, so I had to land with what I had. And I was very, very glad to have my chase pilot calling the altitude, and he's a superb guy. He called the altitude right down to the foot, and all I'd used was the audio coming in from him, 20 feet, 10 feet, 7 feet, 5 feet. And using just that input, I put it on the ground as smoothly as I could. And that's why we're as good as we are at what we do. You know, we cover all the bases. I think Bert's the best there is in this field, by far. There's nobody even in his shadow. And I've worked for him for 26 years, and I'm very proud to have done that. I've done 10 first flights, and we've just had a ball together. And now we've got another team member here that I'm in awe of this man, that he would bet on us to get this done with as little knowledge as he had about us. He's amazing. I mean, that's all you can say. You know anybody else who would have given us money to do this?
Paul, what does it mean to you?
Well, in terms of the sensation that you feel after on the landing, I mean, it's I guess I describe it as incredible elation mixed with relief. I mean, all the adrenaline of watching the rocket go up and watching Bert and his team deal with the anomalies during the flight, watching the altitude go up and eventually surpass the mark that we were shooting for, and then the minute that happens, you're just concerned that the pilot gets back on the ground safely. So these are very exciting, and they're as I'm sure you can feel from how it's been described. It's a very emotional experience, and it does whet your appetite to want to do more things like this.
And could I ask a quick follow-up? With the anomalies that you had today, would this most likely delay any attempt you might try to go for the X Prize?
Again, we haven't looked at a lot of data, but my performance guy says it looks like our performance was spot on. So again, we'll be looking at the data. We'll be looking at all the issues for the X Prize attempts. When we go out for the X Prize, we'll probably fly 2 flights within a week. And but before we announce to them, we spend a lot of money doing that. We got to get ready to do 2 flights. It's not something that costs only the propellant. So I would say in the next several days, we'll make a decision and then announce to X Prize, and that kicks off a 60-day clock. At which point they will announce to you when the time is.
Okay, we've got
The only thing is it can't happen any sooner than 62 days. But if we decide we have a big safety issue with this actuator, for example, that may delay us until we can get it fixed. So, this was not a perfect flight, and then again, a lot of these things you can do within a 60-day window and easily fix them. So I don't want to tell you now other than some information that would be a wrong guess. But
right over here.
Hi, Scott Sinney, Toronto Star. Mike, unless my eyes are surprising me, till a moment ago you had something on your shoulder or on your side of your suit there. Looked to be a lucky horseshoe. What's the story behind it? Did you take it with you on the flight, and why?
Yeah, I did. My wife pinned it on me before I left. I gave it to her when she was 16 years old. I designed it and I had it made by a jeweler, and I gave it to her when she was 16. I married her when she was 17, and we've been married for 43 years. I've flown 7 flights. How many flights? 9 flights in the SpaceShipOne now, and I've worn it on my shoulder every flight. And so far, it's kept the luck for me.
Thank you. Over here.
I'm Álvaro Pereira from TV Global Brazil. Mr. Allen, do you think that actually winning the X Prize would be more fun than today's flight was?
I guess it's definitely accomplishment, but milestones like this just don't happen that often. So I just think it was very exciting to be part of this, be here today, and be able to hit that milestone. So it'll be exciting, and I think we'll get a great turnout for that as well.
Okay, back here in the green shirt there. Yeah.
Bill Sweetman, Popular Science. Mike, could you kind of walk us through the steps of the flight, launch, light off, ascent, going over the top, and just to give, perhaps, if you could sum up quickly, what happened that you expected, what happened that you didn't?
Okay, Bill. Yeah, well, we took off from the ground with the Brian driving the White Knight, and there's very little for me to do at that point. It's a pretty lonely time, actually. You know, not too many people talking to you, and you're sitting there with a lot of thoughts in your head, wondering if everything is going to go smoothly. And then as we get closer to it, when we get above about 43 or 44,000 feet, we start going through a checklist, and we're on an intercom between the two airplanes, so nobody would have heard that. But Brian reads out a checklist and makes sure that I've got my pressurization set in the cabin at the right altitude, that all of the systems and backup systems are enabled. That would allow me to fly the airplane, and I have to set a specific trim setting in pitch, roll, and yaw before we drop off, so that I don't have to fool with that when I light the rocket motor. The rocket motor is lit by enabling two switches. They're both guarded. They have a guard on them. The guard on the right-hand switch, which is the firing switch, is safety wired down with copper wire, and I really hate that because you've got to break that. And so I broke it early this time. Last time I tried to break it during the firing sequence, and that was not the thing to do. So I broke it early, took the wire off, and I was ready to go. Boy, when I dropped off, I instantly unguarded both switches. I hit the arm switch, hit the fire switch, sat back and waited. And it takes about maybe a second, 1.2 seconds, and it lights off. You're instantly got 3 Gs eyeballs in, NX of 3 Gs, and it immediately goes to about 4 Gs NZ, so eyeballs down. So you're looking at a combination of 4 Gs down and 3 Gs straight back, which is very, very disorienting. You feel like you're falling over on your back, and you have to guard against that. And then I follow a predictor that's on the display that leads me up. There were a couple of things that happened that were unusual compared to the last flight. This time, right after I lit the motor, the airplane by itself rolled 90 degrees left. I stomped on the rudder pedal and put in some control, and it rolled 90 degrees right. It's never ever done that before. So at that point, I was kind of reaching for the switch to shut it down in case I was going to lose control. But I was able to get it back, get it leveled up, and started trimming the nose up to pick up the proper gamma, the angle of climb, which is nearly to the vertical. Then it was a pretty smooth ride after that. And then when the engine runs out of liquid fuel, it starts using the remaining gaseous fuel. So you get this chugging feeling where it's using some liquid, it's using the gas, it's using some liquid, it's using the gas. So you get a lot of thrust and half the thrust, and a lot of thrust. So that's a bit disconcerting because the airplane pitches a little bit when it's doing that. And you've got to try to deal with that. And then right up at the top of it, I tried to trim the nose up a bit more to just get a little more height. And that's when I had the anomaly with the trim system, and then I had to deal with that through the backup. After I got the engine was shut down, I started bringing myself to a standstill as far as rates. You know, I'm pitching and rolling and yawing a little bit at the time. And I managed to switch on the RCS, stop all the rates. Then I took time out to throw my little candies in the air and watch them. And then I assessed where I was and started guiding myself back towards Mojave. I headed back to Mojave as fast as I could reasonably fly the airplane without hurting anything. And I got back to Mojave at, I don't know, close to 40,000 feet, 35,000 feet maybe. And it was very comfortable. The descent after that was great, except that I had no use of the trim system. It may have worked, some of it may have worked, but I was afraid to touch it. So I just flew with the trim setting that I had at the time. And the landing was pretty uneventful. I hit a high key about 1,000 feet high, and that let me fly a little wider circle on my circle down to land. And I think it worked out great. Made a decent landing. Landing felt good to me too.
What about the bang that you mentioned?
I'm not sure if the bang wasn't there. If you looked at the airplane, there's a fairing underneath the rocket nozzle, and that has got a very large buckle in it now. So that might simply have been the bang.
Got a question back here.
Steve Turnbull, Flight International. How long was your rocket burn, and did it end any before you anticipated?
Okay, I'm not going to answer that. On how long the rocket
We
burn
don't
was.
know yet in terms of whether he shut the motor down or whether it shut down. And just as well not talk about it until we have real data. Excuse me, just as well not talk about things that we're still confused about right now, because this is way too short of a tech brief before we come over to see you. Some of the details that we have, I'm afraid, might be wrong, so I'd ask you to wait until we publish them on the website. When we do, they'll be known to be correct data. Yeah. Yeah, but we'll answer that on the website. I don't have a good answer for you yet right now.
Okay, next question. Anyone? Why don't you go behind you there?
Tracy Watson with USA Today. Can you tell us how difficult this flight was compared to all the spectrum of other flights you've had before this?
It wasn't as big of a surprise as it was last time. I did the last flight as well that went to 212,000 feet. This was a very similar flight to that, except that instead of going 2.4 Mach, we went to almost a Mach 3. And so that's a lot more speed. That's faster than a M16 rifle bullet. We're going about 3,300 feet per second at that point, so a rifle bullet out of an M16 is only 2,700 feet per second. So you're really hauling the mail. You get the feeling that if you did anything wrong here, you might really hurt yourself. So you're paying attention about as strongly as you possibly can to keeping things perfectly true and upright. And there's a lot going on, and it all happens in a very, very short space of time. So it is difficult to do, and it couldn't be done without the comprehensive training that we do. We go through hundreds and hundreds of simulations. I mean, if somebody, even a good pilot, jumped in that thing, he would be instantly dead if he lit the rocket. Instantly, without going in the simulator.
We've got a question in the front row from Reed Stevenson.
I'm Reed Stevenson with Reuters. Mike, could you describe? Did you see stars? Could you describe how black the sky was? And just more colors. I know you did it on the tarmac there, but just more colors about what you did.
I didn't notice any stars, and we may be able to see those in the video if there were any. The sky was jet black above, and it gets very light blue along the horizon. And the Earth is just, when you see the video, you'll be blown away. The Earth is so beautiful. The colors of the Earth, the colors of the high desert, and along the coastline, and all that fog or low stratus that's over LA looked exactly like snow. The glinting and gleaming of the sun on that low cloud looked to me exactly like snow. And it was really an awesome sight. I mean, it was like nothing I've ever seen before, and it blew me away. It really did.
We've got a question down front here. Go ahead.
This is especially for Paul. First, Paul, on behalf of...
Can you get your name and affiliation?
Ernest Lilly by .com, especially for Paul. First, on behalf of the generation that's dreamed of space, thanks so much for breathing new life into that dream. And to the entire team. The question is, recently you opened the Science Fiction Museum, and now this. Is there a common thread that runs through them?
Well, I guess, from my childhood, I've always loved science and technology, and anything that had to do with space. I probably read every book about, from Willie Lee's book, about rockets. When I was a kid, watched all the Mercury and Gemini and Apollo launches. So, that was in my. I guess it was always in my blood. But obviously, I spent a lot of time in the field of software and other fields of technology, and I just feel really fortunate that I was able to be able to hook up with Bert and his incredible team of people here. I hope I just want to say this one more time. I hope you get a sense today, or if you've seen the ship, the amount of creative technology that goes into it is amazing. But then the teamwork that has to happen, and during the flight, when you hear all the feedback the pilot's getting from the ground, all the support, all the thinking ahead that's going. Okay, we're going to, of course, we're going to correct. We're going to do all that. The teamwork there is really amazing too. So, seeing, and I, as someone who went and saw the first shuttle launch back when I was in the midst of doing some of the initial software for the IBM PC, that these things bring your heart right into your throat when you're there, and as a spectator, or if you're a participant, it's even incredibly heightened. And so I'm just glad to be part of this and be able to try to try to move things forward in the area of private space.
Great, thanks. We've got a question over there with the gentleman in the pen, yes.
Robert Stiebler, Austrian Television. Coming home from outer space, do you believe that there's life out there? I mean, I'm not asking did you meet anybody, but...
No, I certainly didn't meet anybody, and I got no feeling that there was anybody else up there with me, unless maybe it was the Lord himself. But you really do get the feeling that you've touched the face of God when you do something like this, believe me.
And then back there with the hat on, all the way back there, thanks.
I'm Mark Perot from Houston Chronicle, and my question is for Mr. Rattan. Could you explain how crucial it is to fix this trim issue before you fly again? And if you take a moment to sort of explain mechanically what's really involved in what went wrong? Thank you.
The question was how crucial it is to fix this this trim thing before we fly again. There is no way we would fly again without knowing the cause and without assuring that we have totally fixed it, because it's a very critical system. The SpaceShipOne is flown by moving the stick, which moves the small elevons, but supersonically that's not enough control, so we trim the entire stabilizer. Now that is exactly how trim works on a Learjet or an airliner. So that's very conventional. But the failure of trim on an airliner or a Learjet, if it sticks there, in general you can fly back and land safely. In this case, we have one on one side and one on the other side, and so if they get out of sync, then you're out of control in roll rather than pitch. So it's a little more sensitive, and that's why we have these backup systems that let us do it. Again, we haven't looked at all the data yet, and we're going to be very careful taking the ship apart to make sure we don't cover up something by not studying it properly as we take it apart. But we believe that we lost one of those trim actuators, like it became inoperative, which means that when we tried to trim and pitch, we got a lot of roll going. And while Mike was in space, he took the other one and leveled it up so that during re-entry we wouldn't be out of trim and roll. And like he said, we do have backup systems, but we felt that it's better just to study it on the ground rather than to try different things, because he was at a trim that would allow a landing. So we really don't know anything more than that. And the answer to your question, though, is it is a very critical flight control for the vehicle, and I can't think of anything more critical on the vehicle than that system.
We've got a question up front here, with the...
Peter Glaskowski, Electronic Business. The piece that's buckled, is that a scaled piece or a space dev piece? What is its composition and the nature of it?
Space dev piece? No, the rocket motor, the tank and the motor is scaled piece. Space dev does the metal parts inside, injector, igniter. This fairing had never flown before, because the fairing was to fair the body to the larger nozzle that had not flown before. Our larger nozzle was a new development in that we can't test it on the ground, because under sea level pressure it separates in the nozzle. And that part, which we buy from AAE and then manufacture together what we call this unitized CTN, that part is perfect. So there's no issues at all with our motor. In fact, our nozzle consultant came up and looked at it when it got back to the hangar and said that it's perfectly nominal. The fairing itself is a very lightweight fairing. It wouldn't put the ship in jeopardy if the whole thing fell off. We don't know yet why it failed, and we're going to have to study the data.
Okay, what is it made of, and what is the nature of its
it's a very
design?
thin carbon fiber. It's not as stiff as other things on the airplane, because it's just a fairing, and if a fairing falls off, the ship's not in jeopardy. Yes, it was to give us a little extra drag, and it looks a lot nicer too with that fairing on. But we expect that it gives us 3 or 4% less drag in a supersonic area. Okay. Now, if it failed early in the boost, then it probably also contributed to the fact that we didn't go as high as we had planned to.
It seemed to be riveted. That's not normal for carbon fiber pieces.
It's not riveted. No, it has mechanical fasteners.
We have a question back here again.
Jim Bennett, TVI, Clear Channel. Now that you've proven you have the right stuff and it's in the record book, how do you think this is going to influence future organizations and individuals to do their version of the right stuff, especially in producing high-quality performance at a reasonable price within a reasonable price frame?
I mean, I think we've clearly shown, it can be done, and we think we have a great set of technological improvements and ideas that Bertie's team came up with that enable that. Other teams are taking different approaches, but certainly ours works.
Okay, back here. Thank you.
Otis Porch at Business Week. For when you were talking, I'm over here to your right.
Otis. Oh, gosh.
Hi. When you were talking yesterday about the $10,000 to $12,000 tickets, was that for the space planes that you're designing?
No, that's what I referred to as a second generation.
Right. Those are the 6 to 12 passenger planes that you're working on now?
What's that?
The 6 to 12?
Again, I said yesterday we don't talk about what we work about in the future because talking to you about them would mean that I wouldn't get much done on them. And that's really, guys, that's why. This program would be a year late if we had decided to answer people's questions about it. So we like to do things quickly because it's important for our customer that we do them quickly. And so that's why we are secretive about it. But I can't talk at all about anything we're doing beyond this airplane.
It's fair to say as you scale up the number of passengers, the price gets
Yes. Oh yeah. It makes an enormous difference to fly 6 or 10 people. Because whether you're flying 6 or 10 people, you're flying the same avionics, you're flying one pilot, you're flying the same checkout, pre-flight, and post-flight, and those are the expensive things. The pilot and just checking it out before and after a flight costs more than the propellant. So it's an enormous difference if you have at least 6 seats. And again, suborbital space tourism is very different than orbital. In the suborbital tourism, you don't go to a destination. You can't go to a hotel, right? Orbital, I don't think orbital space tourism makes sense to fly in a vehicle where you stay in it for your vacation, because it has to be small and cramped. So you go to a resort hotel in orbit is what you do. And you build something small and cramped so that it's cheap so you can get there.